My name is Damien Willey, better known as Cornish Damo. Tonight we're examining carers' allowance. There to support people who have given up work to care for long-term sick or disabled loved ones has gone up this new tax year by 5 pence a day. Just 5 pence. This role of unpaid carers is perhaps a misunderstood one, so here's some facts for you. According to Carers UK, prior to the pandemic, there were 9.1 million unpaid carers in the UK. But by the middle of 2020, that had risen to 13.6 million people. Not all of these people will be eligible for carers allowance. They're going up to a ground total of £67.60 a week. It is means tested, so if you're retired, you can't get it. If you earn more than £128 a week through work, you can't get it, even though it'd only bring your income up to a measly £195 if you did. And if you earn just 1 penny over, you lose the entire allowance. You need to care for a minimum of 35 hours per week to be eligible for it, essentially meaning you're already working a full-time job, full-time hours, but being paid at an hourly rate of just £1.92. Many carers work for more hours than this, dropping their equivalent hourly rate still further. If you happen to be a carer for more than one person, as I am myself, you still only get £67.60 a week. Unpaid carers, whether in receipt of carers allowance or not, according to the ONS, save the UK taxpayer more than £60 billion a year. So why are they rewarded with £1.92 an hour or nothing at all? Discussing this with me today are unpaid carers Laura Baines and Sarah Woodbine, as well as a recorded contribution with carer Colin Nicholas, who wasn't able to join us at the time of this recording. And of course, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Sarah G, once more. Welcome, ladies. How are you?
Good evening.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for joining me tonight to share your stories on this subject. Not necessarily the easiest thing to talk about. These stories are inherently rather personal because of the very nature of them. Shall we start with you, Laura? Would you like to tell us your story?
Yeah. My son was born 14 and a half years ago. Nothing was picked up all through the pregnancy. He had a little bit of help when he was like first born with breathing, and then we kind of just took him home. I kind of knew he was very floppy. They kind of made out like I was a bit of a crazy lady, but he was baby number 4. So I kept mentioning things to the midwife, like he couldn't suck properly and he wasn't taking his feeds, and she sent me to the hospital, where they sent me back. She sent me back to the hospital, they sent me back, and then I was really worried about him, so we called the on-call doctor. He was about a week old at this stage, and then he told me he needed a good cough. Come the following week, they took him in for a couple of days, sent him back, everything was okay. A week later, the health visitor come. She was absolutely petrified. She said, I'm just nipping to my car. Before she got back, there was an ambulance there, and he was rushed in on 70% oxygen, blues and twos. And that's where it all began. About a fortnight after, we found out that he had a rare genetic condition called Cri-du-Chat syndrome. I think he's about maybe 1 in 40 to 50,000. Along with that, he also has autism, sensory processing disorder. He has respiratory problems. He is fed through a peg tube in his stomach. When he has chest infections, he needs to be suctioned. He's double incontinent. He can't walk or talk. He also has CPAP at night, so that he has obstructive sleep apnea. So because he's got low muscle tone, everything kind of collapses here. So he stops breathing overnight. So the CPAP opens that up. So he's also had an operation to kind of stop him from being sick because he aspirates the vomit because of the low muscle tone. That kind of just slips back up. So he was effectively drowning himself every time he vomited. But even like spit and things like that, he can aspirate that. So he's to sleep on an angle. So overnight, because he's 24-hour waking watch, you have to make sure that he's in that position. And originally we lived in Lancashire. That's where I've lived all my life. We had to fight with the CCG there. We got legal help, and the lawyer there told us that I needed to remember that the law trumps policy every time. And he got us 7 nights waking watch. So then other things started to happen, obviously, with this government. And it became, because we needed a 4-bedroom house, we then couldn't afford rents and things like that. So we managed, like, through the family fund and things like that, to get a holiday every year. So we used to come to Cornwall, and we just decided that because the rents were still higher in Cornwall, that's just where we were going to be. That's where everybody were happiest. So that's where we moved to. The climate has been a lot better for his chest infections and things, but everything is still the same. The rents and things smaller, housing prices are going up, and we now get no hours care. Social services have recently put 8 hours in, but not for domiciliary care or any help like that. It's called a twilight shift. So twice a week, somebody will come in and basically, like, go through books and play games with him, which obviously his siblings or we could manage. Doesn't really take the load off anything. What we need is the waking watch hours so that we can function and be a family. But they don't seem to want to help with any of that.
No, this is it's a familiar story, actually, with councils saying they can't do this and they can't do that. And of course, under this government, we've seen various, council budgets have been cut. There is an argument for saying, well, perhaps they're right. Perhaps they simply can't afford all these things. But then you think, well, surely you've got to prioritize certain things above other things. And surely the health of the people that that live in your area, surely that should be one of the top priorities going. But of course, health and social care has been absolutely hammered through austerity over the last 10 years. And I certainly can't blame you for moving to Cornwall. I'm slightly biased when it comes to that sort of thing. But it is a little microclimate down here. It's true, for a lot of people do come down here for the health benefits of it. And I'm glad that it has helped in one small way. But it's appalling that the help that you need is being refused. And it always winds me up, because the mark of a civilized country apparently is how well the most vulnerable in society are looked after, and the vulnerable in society are not being looked after. And your story is far from unique here. Sarah, shall I move on to you at this moment in time? Shall we hear what your story is, please?
So morning or evening, sorry. I am almost 41, and I was born into a family with an older sibling with Down syndrome. So I've lived with disability my entire life. I've now got a 9, almost 10-year-old who has ADHD and who is going through an autism assessment at the moment as well. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, if it wasn't for myself and my mum and my brother and my dad, who died in 2008, my sister wouldn't be here. She wouldn't be alive today. I mean, where do I start? My mum's told me stories from before I was born, how the health visitor, when she came to tell my mum what was wrong with my sister, she literally left a letter on the table, and while my mum was singing to my sister, she walked out the back door. Okay. Shall I go on to the time when I was away travelling and my sister had appendicitis, and because she had one symptom different to the symptoms you would normally get for appendicitis, her appendix basically burst and she almost died.
God.
Okay, so recently
Talking mid-80s here, or that's
no, I was in Australia. It was 2001/2002.
right,
Okay. So, and recently, we all had COVID.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
November, we all caught COVID. Now, my sister had no symptoms that you would associate with COVID whatsoever. I went on a gut feeling and took her to get tested, and she had COVID, and then she was hospitalised. Luckily, they let my mum go with my sister to hospital, which I know is really unusual at the moment, but I am so glad they did, because it was my mum who ended up caring for my sister in hospital as well. Shall we go into when she broke her leg a couple of years ago? And the consultant surgeon who did the operation to put a splint into my sister's leg has now been struck off for putting the wrong replacement kneecap into somebody's leg.
God.
And my sister complains of her leg feeling strange. I mean, there could be nerve damage. I'm not saying that it is definitely wrong, but there was reported in the news that the wrong splints were being used in people's legs and they were too flexible.
Right.
So this could be what that feeling is. Yeah. And when there were questions asked about this, it was just, oh no, we haven't got any records.
That's horrendous.
So, but it's, you know, it's ongoing. So I support organisations within my local area. It's just the tales that we're hearing with people who haven't got the support at the moment. So we also had my mum suffered a heart attack during the pandemic as well.
Yeah.
And we were basically told the only support we could have was putting my sister into a residential care home for respite.
Which is not good when they've never had that. She's obviously never had that care before. You know, she's used to being cared for by her family.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I mean, she did spend a little bit of time when after she'd broken her leg for rehabilitation purposes. Just because
she had been in that before. Okay.
But it was more the fact that the care homes were suffering, you know, catastrophic from COVID, and we were being told, yeah, you can have respite. She'll have to go into a residential home, and it was just like, what? So, you know, I've got two children. I'm trying to look after them. Luckily, my brother stepped in, and he's amazing with my sister. So she went to stay with him, just to be looked after, you know. But none of this was within the law, apparently, at the time. You know, it was just, there was no support. So what were we supposed to do? Were we supposed to just leave my mum to cope?
Well, it's hardly so. How old is your mother? Do you mind telling us?
She's 73. I'm the baby of the family. So she's 73. So she's saved the successive governments millions, you know. And I'm not going to say any government has been any better, because none of them have.
No.
None of them have.
No, absolutely not. No, I mean, you've made quite clear time frames you've shared. You've explained that these things have happened over. It has been successive governments, and I think so much of it is because these are people that don't have any leverage. I mean, when you're a carer, you've got no choice but to do what you've got to do. You've got to step up and do it. And successive governments have taken advantage of that. How else can you explain a carer's allowance of $1.92 an hour? And of course, your mother, being at 73, will not be eligible for that because she's.
And I'm I'm not, because I work full time.
Yeah.
So it's only through the fact that the organisation I work for are absolutely fantastic, and they understand that, you know, I need to be around, and sometimes it's like, oh, where are you working from today? You know, and I'll be like, oh, I'm at mum's, you know, my bubble. So, you know, the kids are at school, and yeah, I'll be there. So if you need me, I am in, you know, the area. And yeah, it's just because my sister can't be left alone.
No, of course not. No.
She's capable at a lot of things, and it always seems that they over-egg what she is capable of as well.
And this is what we do with so many people with health issues and disabilities. They say, oh, well, you can do this. Oh, well, you must be able to do that. You must be able to do that. Well, no, if you can't do it, you can't do it. But still, when somebody, quite often, especially when you come to these assessments, they've got no formal medical training, they've got no expertise in the particular field, and it's a tick box exercise, and they're just ticking those boxes and say, right, this person's come in with this, no, we think she can do that, or they said such and such, we'll tick that box to say they can do this.
It's all these things, and it's happening to everybody as well. Everybody I know who's got a disabled child, young person or adult who they are caring for, you know. Now it's total inequality as well. Different councils are doing different things. So if you look at direct payments, okay, so some councils have said since the start of the pandemic, do you know what, we know the service or the class or whatever your young person or child has been going to isn't running at the moment, so use that money to make their life better while you are unable to do their normal activities.
Yeah.
Other councils are going, no, we said you could have that for horse riding. No, you can't possibly use it to buy a new tablet.
Ridiculous.
Okay.
Prioritise stuff. Appalling. And of course, you know, it varies from one council to another because different political parties run different councils and take different decisions. There's no uniformity in it.
Is that it's happening that they're not then looking at the whole year of the funding, okay? They then go, oh, you haven't spent this funding, we're going to top it up. So they're not getting then next year's worth of money. Yeah. They top up to the money that they couldn't spend because they've been refused, because they can't spend it on the activities like swimming or horse riding or whatever. And they've been allowed to buy something that would enable their young person or child or adult to have a better quality of life during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then they're going, oh, well, you haven't spent it all. It's just like, so every year, you know, you get an allowance for respite. You can bet your bottom dollar if you don't use all that respite, oh, well, you mustn't need it.
So on.
But you know what, when you've got a support network and you're trying to organise it and you're trying to do things, you know, it's like everyday life, isn't it? Oh, so-and-so might not be able to do this at this point. And so, you know, but it's the same. If you don't use the amount they give to you, they then say, oh, well, you can't possibly need it. Even though maybe the place where you want respite to happen isn't available or the respite carer isn't available, it's down to you, you must not need it.
Yeah, it's foul, isn't it? It's absolutely foul. Which council is it that affects you, Sarah? I can't remember where you come from again.
To my mum, so I'm in a different one. I won't say because I work quite okay,
fair enough.
In different organisations, yeah. So
okay. Well, on that note, I'll go on to share what Colin Nicholas spoke to me about yesterday. Colin Nicholas, thank you for joining me tonight. Talk about carers' allowance in your own circumstances. It's unusual for stories like this to gain media traction. We're often ignored, but your story, which is a very recent one, has gained some press. Can you tell us a bit about your circumstances and what led to you featuring in the local paper?
Yeah, okay. So I have 2 children with multiple disabilities, 3 children in total, but 2 with multiple disabilities. My eldest, Eleanor, she has profound autism. She has ADHD, cystic fibrosis, ODD, and severe sleep issues as well. So we've been carers now for 9 years for Eleanor. Battling to live on carers allowance, a single income family. For a while, we didn't have any income. It was, carers allowance and universal credit, or, previously whatever, the manifestation of that. It's hard. Everything about bringing up kids with disabilities is hard. I remember when we first had Eleanor, one of the other parents we knew that had a child with disability, she said, "You're going to fight for everything, and everything will be difficult. They don't make anything easy." And I always think this is like one of the society's massive, great injustices, that the people that need the help the most end up having to fight for anything that, the hardest. So Eleanor was born, and she was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis via the heel prick test. And we didn't actually find out for a couple of weeks because she was in hospital, and for that first 2 weeks. And on return, we had a knock at the door from a nurse, and she said, "Oh, your daughter's been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, and we need you to go to this hospital in London." At the time, we were living in East Sussex in a place called Rye, which is about 60 miles away from the hospital. And they said, "Oh, here's your appointment. Your appointment's on Monday." I think it was a Thursday or something. "Don't look at anything online, blah, blah, blah. Your whole world is turned upside down." At the time, we were both working. We pretty soon realised that the level of care that was involved with my daughter's needs meant that we both had to give up work. When that sort of dawned on us, we realised that we were renting in our house down in Rye. We couldn't afford to pay the rent. We didn't know, we hadn't claimed any benefits ever before in our lives, so we didn't know anything about that. And anyone who has a kid with disabilities, they'll know that you can't claim disability benefits for the first 12 weeks. You have to wait for this period, and often it's longer than that anyway as well. So we had to move to my wife's mother's house. The long story short, we've moved several times for Eleanor. We've lived in Devon. We moved back to London after that to get her in a specialist school. Yeah. And eventually we've moved to Southend. She's still in the specialist school that she's in at the moment. Unfortunately, it hasn't been meeting her needs, and there's been an issue with a lack of help from the council with regards to respite and being able for her to access the community and things like that, and for to really take the family's needs as a whole. And so in the end, we went to a tribunal to get Eleanor a specialist place at the school, which is a residential school, which we won. I mean, it's very difficult to explain what life is like for people who are bringing up kids with complex needs. You take everything so much for granted. We talk about carers allowance. Carers allowance is, £67 a week. It's nothing. To live on that as a single income, with your benefits it's not sustainable. With racked up loads of debts and things like that.
I think one of the things that people have to work out, especially people who are working, and you think, well, I wouldn't work for this, and I wouldn't work for that, and you've got to have the minimum wage and everything like that. Carers allowance, to get it, you have to prove that you are caring for a minimum of 35 hours a week. That
Yeah.
works out to an hourly rate of £1.92.
It's insulting, isn't it?
Who
Yeah.
would work for that? But of course, we as carers, we have no choice. I mean, I completely understand where you're coming from with a child with disabilities. My daughter has spina bifida. I had three sons, two older than hers. I had two at the time, who had complex forms of cleft lip and palate, and they were in and out of hospital. And I'd had to give up work already, so this was just one more blow kind of thing with my daughter, especially when her needs weren't actually picked up at the time. She wasn't actually diagnosed until she was 3. Wasn't even picked up on antenatal scans. So by the time we knew something was going on, she was in a situation where her spinal cord was under enormous strain, and then we were up and down the road to Bristol for her, and it was just
That's right. Yeah.
after another, and it just keeps spiraling and keeps on like a roller coaster. And you know, this caring role that we do, it is a full-time job in and of itself. I know you can earn a little bit of money aside from that, but you can only earn up to £128 a week whilst on carers allowance. Great if you're able to put aside time that you can earn that. Many carers, myself and yourself as well, by the sounds of this, certainly cannot find that time to do that. And should you go one penny over, that's it. You lose the entire carers allowance.
Yeah, I mean,
with it is crazy.
There's this common misconception that, you know, I'm sure it's fueled by the right-wing press or whatever, that people who sit around on benefits are lazy or whatever, and carers allowance, you know, people seem to think that the carers are that sort of stigmatization of them. And I've had that before so many times. I mean, people don't understand that you would not choose. Well, obviously, you choose to do the best for your child and everything else like that, but you wouldn't, or whoever you're looking at for, because let's not forget, carers allowance, it doesn't have to be someone from your own family, it could be anyone if you're looking after them. But, you know, more typically it's either your own children or it's, you know, an older person or someone with dementia or something like that. You know, I tried to go back to work. I was actually luckily enough to be able to land a job being Emma Dent Coates MP's caseworker when she first got elected to Parliament. But the pressures of having to try and balance going to work in such an environment, and also, you know, Ellie's care meant that it really it was unsustainable, and I only lasted a couple of weeks really doing that, and which I feel really bad for, because you know, I really wanted to help Emma doing that. But yeah, people don't understand that, you know, most people want to go to work, they want to you know, contribute. It's a self-worth thing as well.
It's a dignity thing. You feel dignified by being able to work. When you can't, you do take that personally. And I think there is an awful, like, it doesn't help certainly with the stigma that's around with, as you say, with people, this narrative that's been built up in not just the right-wing press, etc. They've certainly amplified it. It certainly came in around the time that Cameron and Osborne came into power, because we had the whole Shirkers versus Skivers competition going on. But one of the darkest parts to your story, I think, is that you should be somehow grateful for what you've already got. I mean, already you had to take the council to tribunal. Your family were branded spiteful for doing so by the Labour portfolio holder responsible for children and learning, which was liked by several other Labour councillors, including the leader of the council. You've called for an independent inquiry into this matter, and I certainly can't say I blame you. How did this accusation come about? Is an inquiry now underway? And should any of the people involved, knowing how support services have been eroded, knowing what a pittance carers allowance is, be allowed to stand for election in May in light of all of this?
So no, basically, the council, throughout our case, the council was completely in denial about the level of need that my family needed, the level of care that my daughter needed. So even it's a Labour-led council, yeah. So you know, I was a Labour member, and you know, I even stood for election in a you know, in an unwinnable ward, but I wanted to stand because I wanted to put out some of the things that I believed in. I wanted them to get attention from people.
Sure.
So the whole time they were the people like the social workers and everything. We had a brilliant first social worker, and he understood that the need and the pressures were on the family. He labelled our family a family in crisis. He said that there was severe pressures in the family were in, if they didn't get the support that they need, the family were in danger of going into breakdown, and that Ellie was in danger of becoming a looked after child. And that can be a couple of things. That could mean that she has to go into a residential facility, or it can mean that they take the child into care, but with Ellie's complex needs, I don't see that would have ever been really an option anyway. So when they assess your needs, they then take that to a thing called a resource allocation panel, which is basically people from the council sit on this, and they decide. They're supposed to decide what's best for the family and the child based on need. But what I learned was that it was basically done on cost. There were several times that my daughter's care we were refused like overnight respite care and things when we were getting very little sleep, like 6 hours sleep in 3 days and stuff like that. It's just ongoing. People don't really understand what the level of fatigue that does to you when you're sleep deprived. You can't perform basic functions, and you're in danger of not providing the care to the rest of the family as well, because you're sleep deprivation. So they were sort of like the social worker was presenting this, saying this is what the family needs, and they were making these decisions saying we don't agree, but we've realised that these were based on monetary conditions rather than what was this. And they refused overnight respite on the basis that my daughter had cystic fibrosis, rather than her autism or anything else like that. They said that they were unable to, it was too complex a need for her to be care to be provided for. Now, I believe that that's disability discrimination against one particular form of disability.
Yeah.
She's fine. Her cystic fibrosis, it's managed fine in the school environment, and the hospital provides training on anything that they need to do, which is very simple stuff.
Yeah.
So why they couldn't have done that? Eventually, I think it was on the second or third time they went to RAT panel, they eventually said that yes, we'll allow you to have overnight respite, but we'll take your few weekend hours respite that they would awarded us away. So automatically you realise that this isn't a decision that's being made by a disability or the child's care's needs. This is about monetary, because why would you say you can have this part of care, but we'll take this away?
Oh, right. It doesn't make any sense at all.
And so, this is a Labour-led council. This went on for ages, went on for 2 years. And, we've had some terrible things happen to us where, when we actually had, we couldn't carry on. It was unsustainable. The care was coming too much, and it was affecting other members of the other children in the family and stuff. I have a son who has autism as well. He's got very severe anxiety. We ended up having to we realised that we'd have to go down the tribunal route to do this, and this is a very costly, very traumatic experience, and I don't really advise it to people, but I think parents are left with no choice. They're having to do this. As soon as we informed the council that we were going down this route, we had a new social worker appointed. And where the social worker appointed, was there first of all to support us, this one seemed to be, from our point of view, our perception, she was there to undermine us and attack us the whole way. And the whole run up to it was, the whole run up to the tribunal, there was, so many different things. We had to do subject access requests to see what they were actually putting in the notes and things about us. And when we found all sorts of things in them, there was lies written about us that we had to then go to them, back to them and say, we want this struck from the record because this is not true and stuff. And they've presented false evidence to the tribunal panel, which I believe is perjury, but we're waiting to see on what's going to happen on that.
Okay.
It was a horrible, traumatic experience. I mean, to give you an example of how awful it is, under the first social worker, he once came to our house and said he was concerned about my fatigue, and he said that I think you're suffering from depression and you need to go to the doctor. And I said, okay, you want to engage, you want to be seen willing and to help. So I went to the doctors and they prescribed me with medication, but I knew full well that it wouldn't really work because it's the situation. The situation isn't going to change. It's not, taking tablets or whatever is not going to change the fact that I'm not getting the support at home from the local authority. So we went through this, and then later on with the second social worker, she phoned up my wife one day while she was at work, and she said, we believe that your husband is a suicide risk, and that you and we need to know if he will take his own life in charge of the children.
Oh my God.
So obviously, when you find something out like this, my wife obviously phoned me immediately and told me, it's a horrible thing. It's like, if you were in a situation where you were, say if you're a single parent, or if you were, if you were struggling, this is the sort of thing that can push people over the edge. And to defend myself, I went to go to the doctors. I had to get them to print off my notes to prove that it was situational depression rather than clinical depression. And I actually went to a mental health professional who wrote a report to say that there was no concerns over any of this at all. And, we then sent that to the Children with Disabilities team and said, look, this is basically one of the tactics that they use to undermine us. Anyway, we went to tribunal and we won our tribunal, and my daughter's been awarded a place at a residential school, and now that costs, I think it's £276,000 a year. And this is, I've been keen to publicise our story because in my mind, if I had the support, what you're doing is you're asking someone on carer's allowance to do a lot. You're asking them to do the role of a carer, which is a specialist profession, for long hours, 16 hours a day plus or whatever in some cases. You're asking them to do this, and you're not giving them the support. And if you did give them support, the end result might work out totally different, but it hasn't. And now it's going to cost the public X amount for doing this, which is, it's great for us because it's the right thing for Ellie. It's my daughter's name. It's the right thing for her. But, the whole thing has been a really, really traumatic experience. So after this, I wrote to the chief executive of the council and I asked her, I said, look, we're keen for lessons to be learned from this. We're keen to engage. We would like an independent investigation into the working practices of the Children with Disabilities team and RAP panel decisions, because I believe that many families in Southend and where I live are going through this. I've spoken to some of the other parents themselves, and they have had these wild accusations thrown at them and things. One of the parents groups in Southend of parents of children with disabilities, they did a survey. They surveyed their members, and 25% of them came back as saying that they believed that the Children's with Disabilities team or social services were trying to build a child protection case against their children or their families. I think in the national average, I think it's about 2% or something. 25% is just ridiculous. And obviously, you know, I'd put a Facebook post out and I'd explained our story and I'd explained our situation. And basically, I'm just keen for people to learn from what's happened to us so that it doesn't happen to other people.
Yeah.
And the next thing I know, a parent of another child with SEND said, have you seen this post by this counsellor? And I said, no. And I sent a screenshot of it. And yeah, she'd called us, she hadn't actually named us, but, you know, it was the day, or the evening that she'd had to produce a comment for the local paper on our tribunal victory. And she'd said that she'd had experience of winning tribunals herself, but she managed to not be spiteful about it. You know, to me, this demonstrates like how it just demonstrates to me how out of touch people are with the lived experience of what people go through with children with disabilities, or trying to access services. You know, so that's really what happened. And then so obviously I was really upset about myself and my wife were really upset about this comment. So we've put in a complaint to the council, which, you know, hasn't been answered for yet. But also we've had dialogue with the chief executive and the leader of the council to try and get this independent investigation into the children with disabilities team. They the leader of the council seems to want to investigate it himself rather than it being investigated by someone who's independent. And I don't think that you can really get to the bottom of the issue unless it is someone that's outside of the council doing the investigation.
Well, thank you very much, Colin, for sharing your story tonight. I mean, I'm keen to keep tabs on this and to make sure we follow up this story and how it ends up progressing for you. But for now, thank you very much for sharing your quite harrowing story and everything your family has gone through. And I'm sure I speak for everybody who will be listening to this, and certainly us at Socialist Telly, when we say we have the utmost respect for everything that you do, and you certainly don't deserve to be treated the way you have. And I sincerely hope that this is a page turning for your family now, and things are on a road to much better things. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, harrowing story. My heart really goes out to the guy. Really goes out to all the stories we've actually heard today. The overarching theme I think we've heard from all of your stories today is that local councils seem to be where everybody ends up butting heads. It seems to be where we end up having to fight for our fair share, our fair crack of what we feel we should be entitled to. I've mentioned the cuts already to local services, but duty of care should actually trump the expenses. And as Colin's implied in his video, cost seems to be the overruling issue with all councils right now. And that comes back to central government itself, to fund the councils properly so they can deliver the services that people actually need. They're there to look after the country, to look after the needs of the people after all, but consistently don't. And of course, the carers allowance is another aspect of that lack of responsibility, that abdication of responsibility on behalf of central government. What did you make of that story that Colin's made out, and what are how do you feel about the fact that local councils really are failing in their duties of care here?
I hate to say it because, you know, with my family story for my sister, we're so much further along, but it doesn't get any easier or any different and I hate to say that. And it's been proven, you know, my sister is 52. This isn't changing. It doesn't matter what government it is. It was a Labour councillor that tried to shut down her day service about 10 years ago. You know, I was protesting at the town hall with a baby strapped to my chest because they were trying to shut down her and her friend's day service.
Fair play.
You know, and it's not the council that are supporting or the government that are supporting. It's the third sector who are then having to come in and support people. And what do they expect it for? They expect it from nothing.
Yeah. Laura?
A lot of Colin's story resonated with me. I mean, like, I've spoken to you, like, with regards to, like, my own health as well. I've got 4 like bulging discs in my back. I've got a crumbling facet joint. I've got fibromyalgia, so I'm classed as disabled myself. So like I said to you, when I'm down, my husband's left caring for us both, and they don't care. No. They've got no idea what people are going through at home. And then when the social worker comes round, she's like looking at other family members to pick up, like, rather than putting in people.
And of course,
you know,
this current
taking out of their own purse.
In this current climate, you can't just have other family members come in if they're outside of your bubble, and you're breaking the law by trying to get people to come in and help you with.
That's what I mean. My eldest daughter that lives part time with us. She's at uni at Plymouth. She's 22. But like I say, term time, she's in Plymouth. My next one down, I have a son who's almost 18. He's at college full time. So do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're just expecting other people with full-time things to, you know.
That's right.
I can imagine you're like my mum. She never expected me to do what I do. Never expected me. And we shouldn't be expecting that, you know, that family members are just going to stand in and do it. You know,
yeah. My younger children are always like if he's dropped his iPad, or, you know, he needs books and things picking up, or, you know, things like that, or if his feeding pump's beeping and, you know, you're grabbing something else and you're not in the room, then they'll shout, or, you know, like they'll put his pump on hold and things like that. But like the day-to-day, like, because I can't lift him or anything anymore, my husband is like picking up the bulk of things now. Part of my condition, I'm an insomniac. That's partly because I've picked up all the night shifts with him. Yeah. So if I wasn't an insomniac, there's no way we'd manage with him. No. Because the night shifts would be impossible. But like, because he's clinically extremely vulnerable, I'm clinically vulnerable. I've been homeschooling mine since last March. That's another battle, obviously, with the kids' school. But that's the only thing, I think, because they've been here at home. I think that's the only saving grace at the moment. Once they're all back at school again, it's going to be absolutely crazy. I don't even know where we're, you know, at least we can have like little breaks during the day while they're at home.
That's right. I mean, I pulled my kids out of school recently as well. They had a COVID scare at Helston School, and my wife's clinically extremely vulnerable. She also has fibromyalgia, same as yourself. So I'm quite familiar with being the one that is the primary carer of what's going on with my children. My daughter with spina bifida, as I mentioned in the video with Colin. And as Colin also mentioned, it's a specialist role quite often. I can remember when she was younger, I had to be taught how to catheterize her. What a horrendous thing for any parent to have to do is to learn to do such a thing, because, you know, the nerve damage because her spinal cord was put under strain. Her bladder wouldn't empty properly, so she had to be catheterized several times a day. And I was the one that had to do that.
That's what I mean. Often we're not just carers; we actually have medical knowledge.
We do now, but we haven't before.
Yeah.
Sarah G, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, just like to add to that. I mean, I had my only kind of experience of caring was my when my dad was ill. And that was under a Labour government, and that was bad enough because obviously we were, he had cancer and was also paralysed by it, so it was paralysed from the waist down.
Yeah.
So we were expected to do that as well without any, you don't have any training or anything. So we were expected to help him do what he needed to do to keep clean, look for bed sores, and everything else. So like I said, we didn't have any training, and like everybody else has said, I mean, and that experience was bad enough because obviously we didn't get carers allowance and things like that, so the family was expected to muck in basically, and do the best we could with him. But I mean, for me, all these, I mean, this will be up and down the country, and it just, for me, it just screams, obviously, like the original idea at NHS was to be on a needs basis rather than a cost basis. So what if the carers system was all changed to a needs basis? What difference do you think that would make to you, rather than a cost basis?
Sarah, would you like to start with that one?
To start off with, they'd have to start listening to what the actual needs are, not assessing people on what they think their needs are, because they're not here 24 hours a day. I mean, even I'm not here with my mum and my sister 24 hours a day. I've got my own family who need me. My boys are only 9 and 11. But it would be wonderful if that fairy tale world happened, because it just seems that it's every step of the way that we're having to fight constantly. If they actually supported carers and family carers and based it on needs, then we wouldn't have any of these issues, would we, at all? It's, and the thing is that it will cost them more in the long run, because unpaid carers are being driven into the ground, and especially during the pandemic, because there is no support, whether like Laura was saying, and like I highlighted before, technically it was illegal for me to come into my mum's home to help her. That's crazy, absolutely crazy.
Yeah. It is. It's disgusting. Laura, do you want to jump in on that point?
Well, they do, like, when they come and do like your assessments and carers assessments, they're very rarely acted on. They'll do all the needs assessments, but they're not acted on. I think it's just like a tick box exercise to show that they've basically been there and done it. I mean, we do have a pretty proactive social worker, but she basically wants to get him into, well, you'll know, the local hospice. But why not just put a couple of nights caring? Why does he have to go away from home?
Yeah. Now,
do you know what I mean?
At the start of the show, I mentioned that unpaid carers save the government £60 billion a year, according to ONS figures. But those ONS figures are some years old now, so it's probably a lot more than that. We absolutely are not any kind of a burden or anything like that. When we save the economy so much money, it's risible that we can't get support for. They sound like large sums of money occasionally when you hear of what Colin got in his story, for example. When you're talking £60 billion, it's a massive, massive sum. And were we to dump that cost on the NHS by returning to work overnight, the NHS would collapse overnight. It couldn't cope with it. Why do you think our efforts and our sacrifices for our families are not valued? And why does this never get amplified? If you could send a message to MPs or party leaders or whoever, what would you say to them about this situation?
Oh, God.
Sorry, not to put you on the spot or anything.
I don't think it would be repeatable.
What do you think, Laura? I mean, I think it's traditionally because it's women who it falls to.
Yeah. I mean, my husband carried on working until my son got too big. And I think that's why obviously I have a lot of the back problems I do. And I, like, my husband has dyslexia, so I attend all of the appointments and things like that. So I definitely think, like, it's definitely more women, and it's you know, women on the whole do kind of run families. But
You're not wrong. I mean, those ONS figures, they also gave a breakdown of what the demographics of the carers, and 2/3 of all unpaid carers are women. You're not wrong in what you're saying at all.
You know, and even if you can manage to go out to work with the disabled member of the family, if something goes wrong and they're sick or they have an accident and they require extra care, my mum lost her job every time. Yeah. You know, no employer wants to take on that risk. So
I lost that then.
That's right. That's right. For all the incentive to work your way out of poverty, sadly, some of us. I mean, we are working. I mean, unpaid carers are as I said, you're in a full-time job. It is a full-time job in itself, and it deserves some dignity and it deserves some respect for the efforts that we put in. But sadly, that is a situation that
I've done today.
Is not present. Laura Bays, Sarah Woodbine, thank you so much for joining myself and Sarah tonight. Fundamentally, I think we have no leverage is the reason carers such as ourselves are walked all over by the government, even local government. And we have no choice but to look after our loved ones because we love them. Because services that once upon a time might have been there to assist us have been eroded and have gone, placing more of the burden upon families and absolving those in power of responsibility. The fact is, nobody sets out in life to become an unpaid carer, but it could happen to any of us. An accident, a life-altering health issue, and all of a sudden, financial security evaporates. State support is not there anymore, either financially or through local support services. I mean, honestly, people watching this, could you live on $1.92 an hour? We talked about a lack of leverage, and you need to realize that because of that, and a media casting a blind eye, the government gets away with this. And if they can get away with that with us, frankly, they'll try it with anyone given half a chance. Look at how wages are being eroded to see the truth in that. Write to your MP, write to your local councillors, many of whom are seeking re-election in May, and ask them what their party or what they are doing locally in order to fight for the support of services for long-term sick and disabled people and their carers. Especially ask your MP, could they live on $1.92 an hour? And if not, why should anyone?